Good morning. My name is Jason Coyle, Operations Section Chief for Southwest Area Team 1. Today is June 20th, and this is your morning operational update for the Calf Canyon and Hermits Peak fires. So before I get into the update, I just want to tell you all thank you very much for all the kind messages and the birthday wishes, the happy birthday wishes yesterday. It really made my day, and especially when someone compared me to Jocko, because he's a bit of a mentor of mine, although he doesn't know he's a mentor of mine, but how he delivers simple information or complex information simply. And he's a big meathead. I like that about him too. So anyways, I appreciate the compliments. Yesterday, we had a little bit of growth that was shown on the southern end, more just a product of more accurate mapping. And so right now we are calling the fire 341,471 acres. Still 72% containment. I'll go into the containment and the perimeter questions that we had in just a moment. And then there's 2,519 personnel assigned to the incident. The midnight fire, which was our responsibility until 0700 this morning, when we transitioned it back to the Carson National Forest. So they have a local individual for what's called a Type 4 IC, managing that with about 100 people. And that fire was at 95% contained when we transitioned it back. The Hondo fire is controlled. That was the small initial attack from 2 days ago. The Pickeries fire is contained, and we expect it to be controlled today. So there's some terminology that we use on small fires that differs from what we use on large fires, or it should be more, I should say, the way we use terminology differs on small fires than it does on large fires. And I would submit that may be confusing to some. Frankly, it's confusing to me. I don't understand why we do it that way, but I don't think it's anything I'm going to change. So I'll just explain to you what it means. So when we're talking about on our large fires, we talk about percent containment. We look at all the perimeter, and it's the perimeter that is on the exterior of the fire, and also if there's any large unburned islands, whatever perimeter there is along the interior of those unburned islands, as they that is all perimeter. So we take that perimeter number and say it's 100, and then we talk about how much of that perimeter is controlled. So say if there's 50 miles of the 100-mile perimeter that's controlled, then we're 50% contained. So so that's how that works. So the normal ways, well, I don't know if they're normal or not, but the ways that are most often used, or the conditions that most often change the perimeter size are, number one, perimeter growth, right? If the fires continue to move, it has more of an edge. The other way is if the fire burns through an area that leaves a bunch of unburned islands in it, and so each one of those unburned islands has a perimeter. So 5,000 acres of growth, when it grows, forward 2 miles and sideways 2 miles, which actually isn't 5,000 acres, but pretty close. That would produce less perimeter. Whereas if that fire burned forward 8 miles with a bunch of green islands in it, you could have like 3 times the perimeter added. So that's the thing about perimeter, and that's why those numbers fluctuate. As we look at those green islands, it can be surrounded by fire, it can be out in the wilderness, it can be nothing else going on there. And if there's no heat around the edge for quite a while, we're like, that's not going to close up. Then we'll call that edge controlled. And so we'll put black around the inside of it, and then that could increase our percentage of containment. If we go around the edge and put the fire out like we've been doing from north to south, and with the exception of the stuff in the Pecos Wilderness has pretty much been done, then that would add to our percent containment. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense. Kind of confusing. And then on the smaller fires, when we say a fire is contained, then it means that we have line all the way around it. And that as long as personnel are staying there engaged on the fire, we don't expect it to grow. So just forget what I just said about large fires and just talk about like those lightning strikes we had the other day. That as long as we get line around it, as long as we're taking care of it, we don't expect it to grow. And then when it's controlled, that means that we can walk away from it. So it's 100% contained. then we say it's controlled, and then that means, all right, that fire's not going to, it's not a risk to grow. We don't have to risk people to go in there, but we're going to go check on it. And usually we check on it for about 72 hours. And then after you look at it for 3 days in a row and you make sure that what you thought was the condition on day 1 is still the condition on day 4, then we'll say the fire's out. So that's how that works in the initial attack small fire world. All right. So hopefully that made sense. If it didn't, put it in the chat and I'll try to do better next time or answer it. So we'll talk about weather for a minute. Excuse me. So the weather that occurred yesterday over the fire, in the last 24 hours, we got 1/2 inch to 1 inch of rain on pretty much the western side of the fire through the Pecos, and then up to the north across where our indirect lines are. So our contingency lines. And then around the Mora area east, we got about 1/3 of an inch. So today, there's only about a 20% chance of wetting rains. So it's down from yesterday. And now tomorrow, we're supposed to get very heavy rains starting about 5 o'clock in the morning and lasting until 11 o'clock at night. So the rains tomorrow are expected to exceed across a large area of the north zone of the fire, and actually, frankly, a large area of the entire fire, exceed some of those thresholds that have been set for flash flood potential. One of the challenges that we're facing right now going forward when it comes to communicating that to y'all through the meteorologists and also anticipating what's going to happen is that we focused on those numbers when the hydrologists calculate them, and I have no idea how they do their job, but when they calculate them, they give us things like how much rain in 15 minutes, how much rain in half an hour, how much rain in an hour would it take to potentially create flooding or create debris flows. Those numbers are, that's one part of the problem. The other part of the problem, and something that we're less certain about, is things that like are going to happen tomorrow. So when you have heavy rain over a long period of time, what is that going to do? If it doesn't rain, say if the threshold is a 1/2 inch an hour, that we know that if we're going to get flooding if we hit 1/2 inch an hour. So if we get 1/3 inch an hour over 6 hours, or for 5 out of 7 hours, something like that, then what does that do? That's the thing that's kind of up in the air. So know this, though, that tomorrow, heavy rains all day, 1.5 inches plus maybe rain over a lot of the areas that have seen severe fire. And the way we're treating tomorrow is that tomorrow it's going to flood. We don't know where, and we don't know how much, and we don't know how much debris is going to come down there with that. But we're anticipating that. We're not. It's not an if, it's when. And so that goes into the rest of what I want to talk to you guys about for a minute. So we, based on that assumption that I just said, and right when there's any uncertainty about a future state, you have to make an assumption. So we're uncertain about that future state. So this is the assumption we choose to make, is that it's going to flood. And now we're planning to take actions today based on that information and based on the days available. And in a way, this is a lot like the way you handle a fire. If you know you need to get a line put in and you need to have that line in before the fire reaches it, that's the days available. If you have to burn out that line to make it where it's going to stop the fire, then you can't wait for the perfect day. If you only have 5 days until the main fire is going to get here, you got to pick the best day of the days available, or accept the fact that it's not going to work if the fire gets there before you get it burned out. So the same thing with this. So we have today, and y'all have today, to figure out what needs to be done around your place, or with your communications plans, with your any sandbagging that you want to get done, anything like that, to make sure that you're prepared. We have today to make sure that we get the lines that are in the areas that are most prone to erosion or the most dangerous for us to work in taken care of as far as rehabbed, and the actions we can take to help prevent further erosion and damage before that weather arrives. And when we look at that work, there's another key, I guess you call it a constraint that we think about, and that is that the maximum available must exceed the minimum required. So if you're looking at your place and you're saying that, hey, you know what, I want to sandbag all the way around the backside of my property, and I want to do this and I want to do that, and you have one day to do it, and you have whatever resources you have, and you know it's going to take you 5 days to accomplish that objective, then the maximum available does not exceed the minimum required to accomplish that objective. So you need to scale down. You need to look at like, hey, where's water got in my house in the past when it flooded? Is there some way I can put these in front of my garage door, and just because maybe garages oftentimes are the areas that get inundated by water, often flooded. So is there things that I have, really valuable pieces of furniture that if the carpet gets soaked, it's going to mess up that wooden furniture? Is there any ways I can get that, even an inch off the floor just to protect it from that moisture if the carpet got wet? All those kind of things. So scale your solutions today to the time available and make sure that you can execute on those and accomplish something that's meaningful, knowing that tomorrow is going to be, it's going to flood. That's Jason's view on the problem. So one other thing that I wanted to share with you was this. It relates. It's called the planning fallacy, and it's this prediction phenomenon. So when we're talking about the maximum available must exceed the minimum required, what ties into that is that it's human nature, and something that happens all the time when we're planning on large fire line construction, things like that, is that we underestimate the time it will take to complete a future task, even when we have knowledge about how long it took us to complete that task previously. So basically what that means is you look at it and you're like, hey, I need to put in 50 fence posts. And you're like, all right, I have 4 corners on that. And so I know I'm gonna have to dig corner posts, and I'm gonna have to go down this far. Maybe I want to set railroad ties as my corner posts for my H braces. And then I'm like, well, I can dig, if I dig 2 corner posts per hour, then I'll have this all done by noon. And that's, maybe you can. That's cool if you can. Maybe you have a tractor. But if you sit there and think about it and you go back, when was the last time I dug H braces? It's been a while, but when I did, I remember there's a lot of caliche down there. I remember I broke a digging bar trying to get, there's all these things. And so if you take that critical view of what happened in the past and actually break it down in its component parts, you're like, yeah, if I get one done every 2 hours, I'm going to be happy. So you need to adjust your planning to that. And it's a deliberate process. So if you go back there and you look at what you're planning to do for the next day, what you're planning to do to get your communications plan up and running with you and your family, make sure everybody knows what to do, your rally point set, all that kind of stuff. Be realistic about each one of those phases. And we're doing the same thing. There's a lot of work we want to get done out there today. And there's only a certain amount of work that we're able to get done out there today. And so we're looking back at what we've accomplished in the past, still looking to gain efficiencies where we can, but being realistic about what this weather has done to a lot of the newly constructed roads that don't have all-weather services that we're working on. And then trying to say, okay, we're not going to fall victim to the planning fallacy. We're going to make sure that we accomplish the most important work done, knowing we won't get everything done we want to get done, but knowing that we're going to be cognizant of the fact that the maximum available to get the work done must exceed the minimum required. So that's what we're doing. Maybe that helps you guys out there. And I'm not even going to go to this map because everything I just talked about is relative to what occurred. Well, actually, I lie. So I do want to highlight the amount of green that got put on this map on the additional. Remember, the green is completed suppression repair. And as you can see, yesterday we're talking about how they're working down in here and they're moving north, and they are continuing to move north. Talked about this stuff down here and they're moving south and they're continuing to move south. Those little green spots in there don't seem like a big deal, but this Lake Canada del Carro, C-A-R-R-O, sorry, the A014 road, the areas up in here, these dozers line, high burn severity all the way around here. So they're there today with working to try to get as much of this work done as they can today to see if they can reduce some of those flooding impacts, or at least what our suppression repair, our dozer line does to channel water and potentiate the flooding in certain areas. And they're also almost done here around Sierra Bonita. Got the west side done. They're working on finishing up the east side. And get that little piece done and this little piece done, and then they'll be able to start working more towards the middle here. Same thing down here. They're going to start working south. I can tell you that here above Holman, one of the areas that I'm concerned about is where the road comes south, to the southeast, and makes that intersection here by Holman, and all this slope above here. This is a pretty big basin, and this is a pretty big basin, and so I'm worried about what's going to come off this hill tomorrow. I'm worried about what's going to come off over here tomorrow as well, as far as things that are in close proximity to a lot of people and their values. And then, we remember that we go all the way down there. We go all the way down to Leduc and South Carmen. So everything that comes off of this slope that burned laterally across the slope down here by to the southwest of Leduc. So what that means is it didn't start at the bottom and run up. That tends to be less severe, but it's burned all the way down to the communities down here. So another area that we're going to be keeping an eye on as we try to get this work completed and try to minimize those post-fire effects. And then last thing, I'm just going to show you our cool map. Or cool colors, at least. I think that's a better way to say it, because it's representative of a terrible situation. But it's this is a progression map. So each one of the colors represents a different day's growth. And we spent a lot of time around here talking about this map today and looking at areas where the way the fire grew relative to the actions we took could help us to inform future actions and help us to get better at what we're doing, and also the areas that define successes. And right now, this morning, I want to talk to y'all choosing to focus on the successes, and because there's a lot to look at that certainly isn't a success. But this area on the north side of the Rincons, there where this fire was almost through this little bit of aspen that was in here, able to grab it. That was one of the areas that we're like, hey, we need to remember what we learned from there. The other area is here to the west of to the northwest of Chacon, where the fire, if it would have got up a little higher, there's continuous fuel that could have taken it all the way to the northeast. And then certainly I think the biggest one, because it required the most work and presented the most risk of any portion of the fire that we worked on, was this little section above Angostura. And just seeing all those little tiny deviations, or little tiny polygons, if you would, the little blocks of growth. Just a reminder of how once the fire made that big push here, and then we committed all the air resources and all the ground resources in there, that combination of air and ground was contributed significantly to success, and success that would have that prevented it from getting across the 518. And it's probably that's the one that would have been the most likely to threaten Angel Fire. That is not to diminish everyone else that has been impacted in the multiple areas along here. It's just a little insight into what we're trying to do to gather the lessons that we can from this, so we can improve how we engage in firefights in the future. So with that, that'll be the end of your operational update. Thank you.